Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. A lot to talk about this week. Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One continues to impact a lot of card prices in the secondary market, but there's other factors too making cards jump. You're going to see that throughout the video today. As always, we're going to deep dive into all the cards that are moving up at least $2 and the reasons why. First though, a couple things. I do want to say thank you to two viewers who gave super thanks tips during last week's video, Alpal8319 and Arthur Galt. Thank you both for the super thanks tips. It really helps the channel a lot. I do appreciate it. But as I always say, super thanks tips are always appreciated but never expected. They go a long way, but so does watching the videos, leaving a like, subscribing, a comment, telling people about us. All of that helps tremendously as well. But thank you again, Alpal and Arthur. Really appreciate it. And also, too, another way you can support the channel, if you go to FlipsideGaming.com, you can use the Heroes promo code to save 10% on orders over $10. Currently, you can pre-order March of the Machine products there. They also have a whole lot of other things on their website. Remember, if your order's over $100 or consists only of singles, shipping will be free in the United States. Also, whenever you use the Heroes promo code, it does support the channel, which is always appreciated. So thank you, and without any further ado, let's get into it. We're going to begin with the Standard Legal Spotlight. This is where we look at the Standard Legal cards moving up the most this week. Two to talk about. Boseiju Who Endures, up 315 this week to 39.89. This is in lots of decks and lots of formats. In Standard, this is in Selesnya Poison and more. This really started to move though when it was seen a couple weeks ago in the Pro Tour. It was in 4 Pioneer decks in the top 8 there, 2 Lotus Field combo builds, Enigmatic Fires, and the second place Aura's deck piloted by Benton Madsen. Additionally, you see this in other builds in the format too, like the popular Nykthos ramp decks. And this gets a lot of modern play too. It's an Amulet Titan, Indomitable Creativity, and much more there. Legacy, it's in Elves and more. Vintage, you see it in Oath of Druids and more there. Plus, it's getting more Commander play now thanks to Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One. This is an Atraxa Praetor's Voice, and many players are putting together those builds because the new set just brought so many tools for them. It's also in builds around new cards too, like Atraxa Grand Unifier. It's a good upgrade to the Corrupting Influence Commander deck, and it's in fresh builds around a card from there, Excel Sign of Atraxa. And the last card in this section is Sheoldred the Apocalypse, up 318 this week to 69.99, and this gets a lot of play too. In Standard, it's in Grixis midrange and much more. Pioneer, you see it in Rakdos midrange and much more there. In Modern, sometimes this is in Yawgmoth. Legacy, it's in Doomsday and Grixis Control, but now you are starting to see them in the Atraxa Grand Unifier Reanimator decks too, more on those later. In Vintage, it's in Doomsday, Oops All Spells. It's even getting some additional Commander play now in some retooled Atraxa Praetor's Voice decks, and in Atraxa Grand Unifier builds. And that quickly brings us to the Pioneer Legal Spotlight. A lot of cards in this section. Let's take a look. Spirebluff Canal, up 202 to $20.21. This is in the Pioneer Teamer Indomitable Creativity builds. And a couple weeks ago, there were 2 copies of that deck in the top 8 of the Pro Tour, including the winning deck, piloted by Lew Dukes. You see this in other builds in that format too. In Modern, this is in the popular Murktide Regent decks and more, and it's in the mana base of various Commander decks too. Grim Tutor, the one from Starter 1999, goes up 207 this week to $75.45. This is a tutor that you find in a number of Commander builds, including Atraxa Praetor's Voice at times. It lost a good amount of value over the last few years due to some reprintings, but this copy is creeping up some now. Emeria's Call is next, up 226 to $10.74. There are 4 copies of this in the new Modern Mono White Humans Anti-Fury build, which is performing very well on MTGO. Once it won a Modern challenge, many content creators started playing it and discussing it, like Andrea Mengucci and Magic Aids. It's also found in a few other Modern builds as well, but that really is the catalyst for this movement this week. In Legacy, this is part of the very popular Mono White Initiative builds as well, and also can be found in many of the offshoot versions of that deck. Same thing in Vintage, where you see it in Mono White and Orzhov Initiative. And it is getting more Commander play now too, and builds around a couple new cards from Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One, Hellish Norn Mother of Machines, and Montrak Glory Dominus. This was also in a Chun-Li Countless Kicks deck on an Extra Turns episode of the Command Zone podcast this week. That could have brought a little more attention to it. The card that will not go away, Vorinclex Monstrous Raider from Keldheim, is up 237 to 79.87. This creature is one of the borderless concept Praetor cards that can be found in Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One set, draft, and collector boosters though. However, that has not stopped this copy of the card from climbing. It is really being pushed by the mechanics and many of the cards in Phyrexia All-Be-1. It is good with or against many of the new cards. It's highly played in Commander, and many times you do see this as the Commander. It's commonly found in Atraxa Praetor's Voice and Grand Unifier decks, and it's in some other new builds too, like Uzuri Stalker of Spheres. Plus, it's a good upgrade to the Corrupting Influence Commander deck, and in fresh builds around a couple cards from there. Ixal Scion of Atraxa and Vishgraz the Doom Hive. Mana Confluence from Journey to Nyx, up 255 this week to 2792. This was in the second place Pioneer Auras deck in the Pro Tour recently. It's in other builds in that format too. In Modern, it's in Dredge, and you see this in Commander, Atraxa Praetor's Voice, and Grand Unifier builds. Plus, it is seeing play around the Eternal Legendary Mirror from Phyrexia All-Be-1, Urtet Remnant of Memnarch. The Chain Veil is next. The list copy is up 240 this week to 3454. The Magic 2015 copy is up 296 to 3348. This is in the very popular Pioneer Nykthos ramp deck, but it also gets a lot of Commander play. You see this in many Atraxa Praetor's Voice decks, and it's in builds around new cards from Phyrexia All-Be-1 too, like Tekuthal Inquiry Dominus and Venser Corpse Puppet. Also this week we learned that Commander Masters is coming later this year, and one of the Commander decks is called Planeswalker Party. So if this is not reprinted there, it could be a good upgrade in the future. Cyclonic Rift is next. The Double Masters copy is up 211 to 4223. The Commander 2014 copy goes up 303 to 4335. This was in one of the Pioneer Lotus Field combo builds that made it to the top 8 in the Pro Tour recently. It's also a huge Commander card that is seeing more play now in new builds like the updated Atraxa Praetor's Voice decks, Atraxa Grand Unifier, and Urtet Remnant of Memnarch. Additionally, this was in that Chun-Li deck and a Morophon the Boundless deck on that Extra Turns episode of the Command Zone podcast this week. Last card in this section is Mutavault. The Morningtide copy of 216 to 1713, the Magic 2014 copy of 616 to 1998. Now, here's a card that got a lot of play in those Pioneer decks in the Pro Tour top 8. It was in Rakdos Midrange, Mono White Humans, and the two Teamer Indomitable Creativity decks, including the first place one. It's in other builds in the format too. In Modern, this is in Merfolk, but it's also in those new Mono White Humans Anti-Fury builds I talked about earlier. In Legacy, it shows up in Merfolk, and it's in several Commander builds, old and new. Some new examples would be Graz's Unstoppable Juggernaut and Karomonix the Rat King from Phyrexia All-Be-1. And this is a good upgrade to the Rebellion Rising Commander deck, plus it shows up in fresh builds around Othari Sun's Glory from there. Time for the Modern Legal Spotlight. Quite a few cards in this section too, let's get into it. Ranger Captain of Eos is up $2 to $29.30 in Modern. This is in Selesnya Life Gain. And this is getting increased Commander play too in Elishnor and Mother Machines builds. Doubling Season from Ravnica City of Guilds this time. It goes up $212 to $92.51. Very popular Commander card in lots of builds like Atraxa Praetor's Voice and Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. And it's in some builds around new cards as well, like Urtet Remnant of Memnarch and Uzuri Stalker of Spheres. Plus, this did get a Command Zone podcast mention this week as well. Wood Elves, the Portal copy is up $272 to $11.49 this week. This copy is hard to find online in high grade, and it did dry up a little this week. Although, this is down quite a bit from where it was at the start of the year because it has seen some recent reprintings. It was one of the Magic 30th Anniversary promo cards, and it was recently in the Weirdest Pets in the Multiverse Secret Lair. But ultimately, if you just want to play with this card, there's plenty of really cheap printings out there that you can pick up for just a few cents. And you might want to, because this does get a lot of Commander play. It's in Atraxa Praetor's Voice and more. Also a good upgrade to Corrupting Influence and a new builds around Vishgraz from there. This week too, it was mentioned in a Nitpicking Nerds video about ramp packages and Commander. Inexorable Tide is next. The Scars of Mirrodin copy is up $272 this week to $18.09. Another card moving due to the new and returning mechanics in Phyrexia All-Be-1. You also see this in Commander Atraxa Praetor's Voice and Grand Unifier builds. And it's in decks around other new cards too, like Uzuri Stalker of Spheres for example. Contagion Engine, the list copy is up $283 this week to $25.09. Here's another card being pushed by Phyrexia All-Be-1, surprise surprise. This is a solid Commander card and combo enabler in several builds like Atraxa Praetor's Voice again. It's also showing up in a ton of new Commander decks around cards from the new set, including Uzuri Stalker of Spheres again. Additionally, it's a good upgrade to Corrupting Influence and in fresh builds around Ixal and Vishgraz. Blightsteel Colossus, the copy from the list, is up $339 this week to $41.70. This was recently added to the list, so it is trying to find its price point. It was also reprinted in the Transformers Optimus Prime vs. Megatron Secret Lair. When it comes to gameplay, it's in a variety of commander decks, including a Trax Praetor's Voice. It's also in new builds like Goria Forged Tyrant, and it's a good upgrade to Corrupting Influence and in new builds around Ixal. Plus, this was present in that Morophon deck on extra turns this week too. Bloodstained Mire. This is the original Onslaught copy, up $3.53 this week to $76. And we see this rebounding after some recent losses. Not too surprising. It is a fetch land, so you know this sees extensive play in many decks in a number of formats like Modern, Legacy, and Commander. This was also in that Morophon deck on extra turns. Gemstone Caverns, that copy from the list, up $409 to $51.40. These are trying to find their price point because I'll tell you, the Time Spiral copy is actually dropping this week. This one, however, moving up. It does continue to see a good amount of modern play. It's in Crushing Footfalls and much more there. Also gets a little legacy play now too in Selesnya Initiative, and you see this many times in Vintage Mono White Initiative. Plus, it's in a variety of commander decks too. Hellish Norn Grand Cenobite. This time we have the Iconic Masters copy, up $5.43 this week to $44.74. This has been a popular commander and in the 99 in many builds, including a Trax Praetor's Voice and Grand Unifier. As you may have guessed, this is showing up in many other new commander decks too, around cards from Phyrexia All Be One, including Hellish Norn Mother of Machines. Also, we have another good upgrade to Corrupting Influence here, and it's in new builds around Ixal and Vishgraz. Giver of Runes. This copy from the list drawing up a little bit this week, going up $8.98 to $20.81, but I do think this is an indicator of this card generally seeing more gameplay. Maybe we'll see some retraction in general, but don't sleep on this card. It's in the popular Modern Hammer Time deck and more there, and it is seeing additional commander play now in Hellish Norn Mother of Machines and Skrull Defector Might builds. Last card in this section today is Shining Shoal. It goes up $13.47 this week to $14.99. And yeah, there are 4 copies of this in that new Modern Mono White Humans Anti-Fury build I mentioned earlier. It is time for my favorite part of the video. It is our salute to all Eternal formats, but mostly Commander. Obviously, not all the cards in this section are going to be legal in every Eternal format, but I'll tell you where they're not legal. Standard, Pioneer, and Modern. Benny Brax, Zoologist, up $2.04 this week to $15. This was one of the Streets of New Capenna Eternal cards. This is getting an increased amount of commander play now due to cards from Phyrexia All Be One. It's in builds around Urtet Remnant and Memnarch, and a number of other new cards. Plus, it is a good upgrade to the Rebellion Rising commander deck and being used in fresh builds around Othari's Sun's Glory from there. AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait, up $2.06 this week to $23.09. This is from the Commander Legends Reap the Tide commander deck, and this only comes in foil. It is a popular commander and in the 99 in many builds, including Kinesos Priest of Thassa. Goblin Sharpshooter, that original Onslaught copy, up $2.09 this week to $26.46. This is rebounding after some recent losses. You do see this in some different commander builds, including Gyre Star and Kellermorph. But this card does see pre-modern play too, and that format has been beginning to have more of an impact on card prices recently. Additionally, this was mentioned in a Nitpicking Nerds video this week about 2-card combos in Commander. They discussed the synergy between this and Basilisk Collar. Piracy, that Portal Second Age copy is up to $15 to $35.98, and it is hard to find in high grade. It's a little dry online right now. Doesn't see that much play to speak of though currently. Grindstone from Tempest, up $2.19 to $39.95. This is in the popular Legacy Painter builds, but now there is a new blue 8-cast Painter deck that's performing really well in MTGO and gaining popularity. This also gets a little commander play too, typically in decks that also contain Painter Servant. Black Market Connections, up $2.20 to $33.75. This is from the Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate Mind Flayer's commander deck. It is seeing more commander play now thanks to Phyrexia All Be One. You do see this in some Atraxa Praetor's Voice builds, but it can also appear in Urtet Remnant and Memnarch. It's another good upgrade to Corrupting Influence and in fresh builds around Ixal Sign of Atraxa. Plus, this was in the Megatron Tyrant deck on that Extra Turns episode this week. Land Tax, the copy from the list, is up $2.54 this week to $44.56. This is in a lot of different commander builds, including Hellish Norn Mother of Machines again, and it does see a good amount of pre-modern play too. King's Assassin, up $2.57 to $17.36. This is yet to be reprinted, and it is hard to find online in high grade. It is also bouncing back after some recent losses, and it does get a tad bit of commander play. Atraxa Praetor's Voice from Double Masters is up $2.77 to $76.99. Okay, so Other copies of this are still dropping, and this did drop quite a bit last week after we found out that it was going to be reprinted in the Multiverse Legends subset in March of the Machine. However, as you can see, this copy is still bumping up a little bit this week due to the high amount of play it's seeing in Commander ever since the release of Phyrexia LB1. Like we discussed earlier, decks around this card are really being pushed by that set. You also see this in the 99 of some new builds, including a Drechsler Grand Unifier and Urtet Remnant of Memnarch. Next we have Ancient Tomb, the Tempest copy. It goes up $2.95 this week to $87.91. This is a big mana-based card in Legacy and Vintage. It's found in the mono-white initiative builds in both of those formats. It's also in Legacy Painter, both the red and the new blue 8-cast builds. Plus, it's in a lot of Commander builds, including a Drechsler Praetor's Voice and Urtet Remnant of Memnarch. And this was found in both the Megatron and Morophon builds on that Extra Turns episode this week. Sidar Kondo of Jamura. This goes up $3 to $9.98. This Commander 2016 copy only comes in foil, and it is a good upgrade to the Corrupting Influence Commander deck, and it's a new builds around Ixel and Vishgraz. Lion's Eye Diamond. This is up $3.68 this week to $500. It is a popular Legacy card in Doomsday and much more. Vintage, you see this in Oops All Spells, plus you find this in a number of various Commander decks. Reanimate from Tempest is back. It's up $4.15 this week to $22.46. This one is jumping because it is found in the updated Legacy Reanimator deck with a Drechsler Grand Unifier. It's also in some other builds there too, and it's in lots of different Commander decks, but really Reanimator and Grand Unifier are what's pushing this right now. Pearl Medallion, the Tempest copy is up $4.27 this week to $44.82. The Commander 2014 copy is still retracting from its spike that we saw a couple weeks ago. This one's still jumping as they get closer in price. When it comes to gameplay, this is found in many mono-white Commander builds, and it's in some new ones around Phyrexia LB1 cards too, like Elish Norn Mother Machines, for example. Mox Opal is next. The Scars of Mirrodin copy up $3.77 to $83.94. The Double Masters copy is up $4.77 to $86.90. Legacy Painter uses this, again, both the classic red build and the new blue 8-cast version. Plus you see this in other Legacy decks too. It's in Vintage Paradoxical Outcome, and it is a very popular card in Commander as well, getting more play now in new builds like Urtet Remnant of Memnarch and Chisgoria Forged Tyrant. This was also discussed in that Nitpicking Nerds video about RAM packages in Commander this week. Scrubland from Revised is up $6.31 this week to $340. Overall, these revised dual lands have stabilized and in some cases have been moving up since the drop we saw following the Magic 30th Anniversary Edition announcement. They are highly played in all formats where they're legal. Phyresis Outbreak is next. It's up $6.56 this week to $8.75. This is from the Corrupting Influence Commander deck, and sure, it gets play in builds around cards from there, like Ixel and Vishgraz, but it's also in a variety of other Commander builds, old and new, including a Drechsler Praetor's Voice and Grand Unifier, for example. This is certainly one of the breakout cards from those new Commander decks, at least in the short term. Mana Crypt is next. The Eternal Masters copy up $2.69 to $204.25. The original book giveaway media promo is up $7.10 to $330.39. Of course, you see this in lots of vintage builds, including Paradoxical Outcome, and it's a big Commander card in many decks, including a Drechsler Praetor's Voice. It's in new builds too, like Urtet Remnant of Memnarch. Show and Tell, that Conspiracy Take the Crown copy jumping up $8.52 this week to $34.53. Legacy, this has been in Sneak and Show and more, but the reason it's hot right now is because there is a new Atraxa Grand Unifier Sneak and Show build out there, and it's doing pretty well right now. We'll have to see if it sticks around in the meta. This also gets a little Commander play too, but again, Atraxa Grand Unifier is the key driver here. One more revised dual land this week with Savannah up $11.37 to $365.97. And our last card today is Sliver Queen. This week it's up $66.84 to $370. This reserve list legendary Sliver is rebounding in a big way after being soft for a while. It is a good Sliver commander and in the 99 of Sliver builds too. Of course, this is hot because we found out recently that one of the upcoming Commander Masters Commander decks is called Sliver Swarm. That's going to do it for this week's Magic the Gathering Market Watch, but if you're interested in finding out which cards are moving down at least $2, check out the shorts that we put out throughout the weekend. There you'll see all that information. But until next time, hey, stay safe out there. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.